Morning, everyone. Welcome to this public online event of the Cambridge Heritage Data School. This is one of several events that CDH is running. Another one will be in April, and I will make a clear announcement at the end. So today we are going to talk about preserving cultural heritage in the digital age, from specialist access to widespread public use. And we have three discussants. We will start with Professor Almut Hintze. Almut Hintze is the Zartoshty Brothers Professor of Zoroastrianism at SOAS, the University of London, and also a Fellow of the British Academy, and has several other important affiliations. Almut has worked quite extensively on preserving cultural heritage in various forms. I will not go into great lengths introducing her bio because this is available for you to read. I'd rather we start quite soon because so we have enough time for discussions at the end. Our second speakers have not quite yet arrived, but will be soon. And I will introduce them when they are here. May I hand over to you, Almut?
Well, thank you very much, Yasmin, for your kind introduction. It's a total pleasure to be here today and to talk about my project. And I'm going to present to you my work on a very ancient religion, which is called Zoroastrianism. It derives its name from the name of its founder, Zarathustra, who we think lived about some 3,500 years ago. It's the oldest living monotheistic religion with a developed eschatology about ideas of life after death and so on. And these people, there are followers still in the world who practice this religion, but very few, only about 122,000 worldwide. Most of them live in India now, especially in Bombay and Gujarat, but a community of about 10 to 20,000 Zoroastrians is still found in the homeland of the religion, which is Iran. And Zoroastrianism was the religion that was practiced in Iran before the arrival of Islam, and it had been practiced there for about 2,000 years. Now, the Zoroastrians in India still perform very ancient rituals. One of them is called the Yasna ritual, and Yasna means worship. And this ritual takes place inside fire temples, and in particular within the precinct within a ritual precinct which is demarcated by pharaohs. These are pharaohs which are carved into the ground, and they channel away water which flows during the performance. And they also contain the purity which is thought to be present while the ritual is performed. So this ritual takes about 2 to 3 hours in a normal performance, and it includes texts which also are the oldest documents of any Iranian language. This is the Avestan language. And the hymns which are composed in that language are attributed to Zarathustra, the founder of this religion. Here you can see another image of the pharaohs and of the ritual precinct. And here is one of these fire temples. So it's a very ancient ritual. The texts became petrified around 1500 BCE. They have been transmitted orally over millennia, and they are being recited by heart up to the present day. The priests memorize these texts from childhood on. And in addition, we also have written sources of these texts. So the project was about documenting a performance right from beginning to the end, to document it as a live event, which we can still perform to the present day. This heritage is highly endangered. It requires priests which have a great specialist knowledge of having memorized these texts in this ancient language and are able to recite it by heart while they perform the ritual actions. And in this way, we produced the first ever full document of this ritual performance. It was shot at a priestly school in India, in Bombay, where priests are trained to perform these rituals. Here you can see the principal of this school, Dr. Ramya Karanjia, who was one of my collaborators. And our team spent there about 2 weeks documenting the ritual. And you can see the priests here, right and left, dressed all white, which is a color of purity. And these Zoroastrian priests also have a wonderful sense of humor. This is one of our 2 priests, and he arrived in his old-timer car. He's a great lover of old-timer cars. And they were provided with the latest technology. So here they are mic'd up, microphones, so that we could capture all the sound which they produce. And we produced also close-ups of the ritual actions which they performed. And in this way, we produced a full-length film, which is about 4 hours long, the total, in total, because the priests recited a bit more slowly for the performance. For our ears, it's still extremely long. We then processed the film with a software called ELAN, which is a Udoka language annotation system. And this allowed us to transcribe the text which they recite in the ritual, the Avestan text, also have a tier with what this text is, and then also what text passage is in a particular section. So the text, the whole film was segmented according to the text passages. And here you can see the translation, the recitation text, and then also we added a translation. And in this way, we produced an interactive platform where you can actually engage with the film. Now, the multimedia application includes not only all these various tiers, that means the transcription of the recitation text and the ritual directions, which we got from manuscripts, but also interactive points of the objects which these points are matched with the objects which are used during the performance, and the viewer is able to click on any of these objects anytime during the film, and then a window opens in the right panel, and the film stops, and you can actually get some information about the performance. And I would just like to show you briefly how this actually works. So here I'm now starting to play. And here you see all these plus signs turn up, and you can click on one of them. And then here in the right panel, a window opens and you can read information about what this is. And also at the end, we have references, and you can also cross jump to other sections. So you can click on another object. And we have a few pictures of the object which is being described. So these about 50 items in the ritual have been traced throughout the film. So you can stop the film at any time to read about one of these objects, and then you can but then also, as the film plays below, you can see the transcription of the recitation text. This is in this ancient language of Avestan, and below you can see the translation which I made. And then there are also the ritual instructions. So this is our multimedia film which we produced. And then as part and then just a moment, I'm just going back to the PowerPoint presentation. Oh, before I move on, you see here, perhaps I now speak about the problems which I encountered at the end of the project. You can see it's quite a complex output of a project. And it was very expensive to produce this film. These priests have a very specialized know-how, which is in the process of dying out. So the best priest whom we could get was this ancient priest who came in his old timer to the filming. And that gentleman has died in the meantime. His recitation was particularly beautiful, even more beautiful than the recitation of the chief priest, who is of a younger generation. And when we can see how slowly the recitation, the quality of the recitation is slowly deteriorating over time. And this complex application then was developed by a commercial company with which I worked in, a commercial company in London. So when we came to the end of the project, I needed this film to be hosted. The company until then had hosted it on Amazon Web Services, put the film there, and they had done all the coding of these applications. At the end of the project, when we had spent all our money, I asked then SOAS whether they could take over hosting that film. And they said, no, it's too complex. We cannot provide this support. And we cannot migrate your film to newer applications because we haven't got the funding. So, and the ability to do that. So I spoke to this commercial company, whether they can do it. They said yes, but it costs several £1,000s a year. One of the cost items would have been the hosting on Amazon Web Services. The company pays a fee to that provider, to that hyperscaler. And then, of course, their technical staff who needed to support this. So it was clear that this was not a viable solution. And I found myself already finding the situation that this commercial company would simply switch off the film once we stopped paying, and then all our work would have been lost. So this was the problem which I was facing. And then through a very fortunate coincidence, I had the opportunity to speak to Neil Jeffreys from the Oxford Libraries at a conference, and I spoke to him about my project because Neil had raised the problem of infrastructure at that conference, which was also about digital outputs. And so I told him what was my problem, and he put me in touch with Peter Cornwell, whom some of you met yesterday. And Peter Cornwell has dedicated basically his life as a computer scientist to address exactly this problem, the problem of hosting and preservation of digital data, and preservation not only in the short term, but in the long term. So I asked this commercial company to pass on the code, and I took everything out of their hands and passed it on to my new collaborator. And he then looked at it and he discovered that this company had actually custom coded that application. That means the coding was not standards based. And that is almost a death sentence for long-term preservation of your digital data. You do not want custom-made outputs, digital outputs, of course. That's what I'm talking about, because the people who programmed it, they leave, they go away, and they are no longer available, while the company who made it may no longer be there. And that's just one problem. So long-term sustainability requires that the coding of your data is standards-based, and in a common standards which allows everybody to understand how it is coded, and then also allows the data to be migrated to newer forms, to newer software, and also to newer hardware, as the unstoppable development of digital tools and hardware is going on. So I now feel as secure as I can with my film to be kept available. And that film is actually now hosted on a platform which has its center in Geneva with CERN. And CERN has made an agreement with the non-profit company Data Futures, and that is called HASDAI, this agreement. And they are now hosting my film. And perhaps this is the most interesting part of my digital data preservation efforts as far as moving images are concerned. But in addition, we also photographed a lot of manuscripts. So the other line of transmission of the Zoroastrian heritage exists in manuscripts, which are always also very fragile. Many of them are in private collections or in libraries in India in quite unfavorable conditions. Here you can see the leaf of one of these manuscripts, which we just about rescued. It was almost finished. You can see it's badly damaged, and this is one of the best pages of that manuscript. Also here you can see a manuscript and the pages are all loose. So this is also very fragile and it needs to be restored. Also, this one is not in great condition. They need to be restored, but it costs a lot of money. So some of them have been restored, like this one here, but here you can see it's being eaten up by ink gall. So that also will not see, will deteriorate continuously. We photographed a lot of manuscripts, and so we ended up with thousands of images of manuscripts. And then the question was, what are we going to do with all the images which we have produced? And here too, we have found a solution through through the platform on which our data is hosted, which is the Invenio Research Data Management Platform. And they could host not only our film, but also Peter Cornwell created a repository for our manuscript images. And we are now providing the metadata to those manuscript images. Of course, each manuscript has a metadata description. And the point is, of this approach is to ensure that the metadata does not get separated from the object, from the image. So that's also very important. Because an image without metadata is useless. You don't know where it comes from. So here our metadata becomes inseparable from the image within that framework. And also in the repository, we not only have access to the images, which we can view also in high resolution, but also we are able to annotate the images. So in this way, the image repository is also a workspace. We can create a workflow in which we can transcribe a manuscript page, annotate it, transcribe it, translate it, and do everything we want, and attach these annotations to the image. And again, all of this is standards-based. It can be migrated to newer format. It all works in JSON, and it is hosted on that platform. So this can be made available online, but in addition to the online hosting at Geneva, we also have a local installation in Cambridge at the Ancient India and Iran Trust. This is a huge server, and which has not only internet access, through which we can make available our repositories online, but in addition, it has a robotic library which writes the data on tapes. And this tape library sits underneath, and this is nearline or offline. So it's inaccessible to hackers. And in this way, we safeguard our digital objects to ensure that they don't get stolen by ransomware hackers or other type of hackers who try to damage what you have done. And there are multiple installations of this in other places where we then keep copies of our tapes so that we have a distributed library. And in this way, we try to counteract data loss. This is the biggest problem we are facing, loss of data, either to criminal activity of hackers, cyber attacks, and so on, or by accidents that there is accidental damage to the hardware, or there is some other damage to fire or other disasters. So in this way, I'm trying to secure my data. That's what I wanted to share with you, and I'm open to questions if you like.
Great. Thank you very much, Almut. This is an absolutely amazing example of preserving heritage in all ways, not just the digital surrogates of it, but the actual heritage itself through the priest. Thank you. I think we take questions at the very end. And we have several here. And we carry on with the next presentation. I think that was the schedule. So our next speakers are both from the Library of Congress in the US. Natalie Smith, Director of Digital Strategy for the Library of Congress, and Leah Weinryb, Grohsgal, Senior Program Advisor to the Director of Digital Strategy at the Library of Congress. We'll talk about a 5-year plan at the Library of Congress. Can we have the presentation in full screen, please? Thank you. Please, the floor is yours.
Natalie, you're muted.
Yes, I'll start out. Hi, I'm Natalie Smith, Director of Digital Strategy at the Library of Congress, and I'm here with Leah Weinryb Grohsgal today. And our presentation is more about, collecting and preserving, managing data, a lot of data. So it's kind of a really great contrast between the two presenters today. Next slide. Okay. Let's see. There you go. Thank you, Leah. Okay. So if you're not familiar with the Library of Congress, so yes, we're in the United States. We were founded in 1800 by an act of Congress, and we often get in a back and forth with the British Library. Currently, we are the largest library in the world. That could change every year. We're asked to provide the size of our collections by believe it or not, the Guinness Book of World Records, to see who really is the largest there. But we're also, the way that we're set up is a bit different than other national libraries around the world. We also are home to the U.S. Copyright Office, which has a lot of eyes on it right now, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence and the training of artificial intelligence. We are home to the Law Library and the Congressional Research Service, which is, we like to say, the think tank for our Congress, and they provide a lot of data and information to them. We are, just to let you know the size of our collections, we have over 186 petabytes of data. It's growing. It grows about 10 to 15 petabytes a year. That's a lot of data, and we don't know that there's some major actions here in the United States that might take place, and so we might grow exponentially, which is a lot of data. We have over 176 million physical items that we manage as well. On our flagship website, lsu.gov, you have access to 24.6 million digital items, And 6.2 of those are, you can actually engage with the artifact itself, the materials itself, and download it. So we manage systems that are quite large in data. That is a lot of data. And we adhere to the best practice of the 3-2-1 data management approach, which is 3 copies, 2 on different media, 1 on off-site. We also, another best practice that we adhere to is our copies are, we have a preservation copy, and then we have we like to say a publication copy. So we manage our preservation copies separately from our publication copies. So when you go to lsc.gov, you may be able to download, for example, a digital file of an image. That is the publication copy. We're not putting, adhered with a 3-2-1 data management. We're not putting preservation copies. We are actually managing them separately. So preservation is different from publication. So I thought that might be interesting there. Also, I want to add that most of our funding comes from, we are a federal agency, so most of our funding comes from Congress. So we are appropriated money there, but we do have some other funding sources. We do get collections that are donated to the library. We do acquire collections as well, data and physical. Most of our collections that come in are born digital, and I bet you all are very familiar with that term, so I don't have to explain that. And the large majority of our collections come in through the copyright registration submission process. So in the United States, we have a strong flow within the library where if someone submits a best copy for copyright registration, the library has authority to decide if we want to select that item to be in our collection. So we have a lot of data coming in to the library, and there's a selection process around that. And most of our collections are now acquired in a digital format or really born digital. So, and again, that is physical items still. It's digital formats, but it also is data. So we're collecting data sets as well as digital forms of creative works that come in through the Copyright Office. All right, next slide. Thank you. All right, I'm handing off to Leah. Leah, your turn.
Thanks, Natalie. Yes, I'm Leah Weinryb Grohsgal. It's great to be here today. Good to see everybody here. So yes, as Natalie said, at once, we've been doing this for a long time. And we have had, especially in recent years, to evolve our practices in terms of all this data coming in and in terms really of our primary focus on serving our various audiences. So we always like to show a picture of the card catalog or something else from our collection to show sort of this contrast between how we used to be able to serve our audiences with all of these collections. Used to look a little bit like this, and let me see. There we go. Whereas now our work is embodied in a new strategic plan for the Library of Congress. And that is a big part of what we want to talk about today, because this new plan is intended to address all of the data and all of the digital collections that we have to serve our audiences. The primary thing about this strategic plan is that for the first time at the Library of Congress, we like to say that digital is baked into the plan. So we moved from having a separate digital strategy to one integrated plan. It sounds very good and sort of tidy, but it really involved a lot of thinking and a lot of work in terms of how digital would propel all of our goals and objectives moving forward. So obviously, I don't have to tell this group that digital is really integral to most of the work that we do today, but representing that and what it means across this huge, complex organization, all of our collections and services was a real trick that took a couple of years to put together. So a little bit about how we created this plan in order to achieve that. And then we'll talk about some of the ways that we're moving forward and what we really see on the horizon here. So throughout the process of creating this new digitally infused, digital baked in strategic plan for the library, we were really working with staff and leaders across the agency to figure out what integrating digital strategy would really look like for them. Natalie described, how complex our mission is, how many different parts of the Library of Congress there are, and we really had to make them all fit here in order to be able to do this. Our broad aim, of course, always is serving our audiences, both now and in the future, and that was really the goal that we were trying to achieve in creating this digital strategy. So first, we defined digital and digital strategy in pretty expansive ways. We defined digital as using technology and data to meet the library's mission. So as you can see, that's a pretty broad definition of digital, and digital strategy as using digital technologies to create new or modify existing processes, culture, and user experiences to meet the needs of a rapidly changing world. And these definitions were heavily discussed, and they were really broad by design, because all of this is in service to the Library of Congress's mission to engage, inspire, and inform Congress and the American people with a universal and enduring source of knowledge and creativity. So as you can see, our audiences and our responsibilities and our ambitions are really wide. The breadth of what we're trying to do here includes both the sort of very specialized research audiences that we probably will talk more about today, and the wider public and Congress, who have sometimes the same interests and sometimes different interests. Some of our work is to kind of keep going and make things better for people who already know and use our resources, while our other activities include attracting new audiences and kind of meeting users where they are, even if they're not already users. I used to work at the United States National Endowment for the Humanities, and that was sort of one of the things that we did there as well, is these sorts of specialized collections, specialized projects, specialized, digital platforms and so on, balancing that with meeting users where they are and engaging new subjects and really sort of changing the way that we worked in order to do that. So now that the Library of Congress has launched this new plan, what we're hoping is that this work will let us really continue to try to harness the size and complexity of the library. And as I mentioned, this is really, we have to carry it through both in the near and in the longer term. So some things that feel like they're changing, to sort of echo what Natalie spoke about, the demand for our collections, and especially our petabytes of data, are only increasing as we move forward. The workings of artificial intelligence are becoming more complex and widespread every day. And the mission of libraries to provide trustworthy and authentic information has really never been more critical in our view. So since we launched the plan, it's been about a year, and we've done a little bit of analysis on how this is playing out throughout the library, in all corners of the library that Natalie described. We've had some pretty interesting findings, I think, from that about how digital is helping us with this huge mission that addresses all these different audiences. So for example, we had folks throughout the agency talk about what was digital in their 1 and 5 year long plans. So as you can see, it's sort of near and a little bit longer term. And what we found is actually that people are getting good at identifying what is digital per this definition that we've created. It's not everything, right? But it's the work that uses data, uses technology to move the agency forward. And what we found is that about 60% of the actions across all of the units in the library this year are defined as digital. Not only that, one thing that I found particularly interesting is that we have one of our 4 goals is to strengthen capacity, and that one had by far the most digital actions. And I think that this really indicates the growing importance as our agency becomes more digitally mature, but also as sort of everyone else moves forward in this digital world, that people are coming to understand, and it's becoming very clear that digital is important not only in the innovation space, it's not only important in, creating new things, but it's also important in the support for staff, the support for operations, and this sort of idea of strengthening what underlies all of these digital collections. It has to do with sustainability, it has to do with operations, and it has to do with all of those things. And I feel like this might not have been the case, 15 or 20 years ago, but it's certainly the case now. We also found that most, if not all, of the library's 15 objectives had some digital action associated with them. And it was, it fell along the same lines of what was important in terms of strengthening our capacity to do this digital work, as well as our other goals of enhancing services, expanding access, and fostering innovation. And finally, we looked more closely at those objectives and looked at where these digital actions really came into play and found that they address all of these different areas. So access, creativity, space, community, digital skills, operations, systems, and finally, emerging technologies. What we really want here and what we really see reflected in what the agency is doing is that we want this embedded digital strategy in our strategic plan to let us carry on our current activities, as well or better than we're doing now, but also leaving space to add new initiatives into our digital practices as we mature and as our audiences, need different things. One thing that we have to keep in mind that I think echoes the other presentation today is that we really need to balance both the technical and the social aspects of technology and digital transformation. And I think that that's becoming ever more clear as we look at the questions of sustainability, at the questions of the evolution of these digital services and projects. So while digital is embedded throughout the Library of Congress's 4 goals, we wanted to take a minute to zoom in on one, which is the 4th goal of our 4-goal plan, the foster innovation goal. And what we think that this provides us is not only, the idea of fostering innovation, but also sort of a relationship to the other 4 goals, the expanding access, services, capacity goals. The current day and our current digital strategy, we think, has a lot in common with kind of previous paradigm shifts in technology, in the way that we do our work, in the way that we, serve our audiences. So there's a lot to say for looking back at history and sort of planning our route forward using what we've learned from previous technological revolutions, essentially. But I think that the other thing that we're realizing is there's really a lot of uncharted territory here in terms of digital activities. And one of the things that we really wanted at the Library of Congress is for our approach to innovation to both allow us to look back at precedent and look at what we've done before and kind of learn lessons and adopt those lessons, but also keep in mind how many possible futures we have in this work. So fostering innovation, we talk about innovation with a purpose, and the idea that we would be able to do both of those things simultaneously. But in the present, we want that fostering innovation work to move quickly into the other goals involving capacity and services and access. And so we're hoping that this is not sort of just a list of goals that are separate, but that they inform one another, and especially that those innovations are able to move forward into our agency in that way. So that is a little bit about the agency-wide strategic plan. It is intended to address all of the different parts of the agency and all of the different ways that we serve various audiences. That is a major component of what we do in digital strategy at the Library of Congress, but it's not the only thing that we do. So one of the things that we're doing, we bake digital into the strategic plan. We launched the strategic plan. It's now in its 2nd year of implementation, but the work really only began with that. So one of the things that we're doing now, now that we have a new strategic plan, is that we're working every day to develop research, to develop coalitions, and to really look at how we're telling the story of digital transformation at the library in order to be able to understand the sort of thread of the history of these projects and these efforts, but also in order to inform how we're looking at the future and forecasting the future. The other thing that we're doing, artificial intelligence is on everybody's minds increasingly in recent years. And the other thing that we do in digital strategy is that we're coordinating the library's response to these technologies. And that involves sort of a big portfolio of activity, including research, including experiments, and especially including community building, both within the library, among the various parts of the library, and outside, being part of national and international conversations about how these technologies can help and how we actually utilize them with the best sense of kind of responsibility to our mission and to our audiences. We also pay attention to other emerging technologies and methods in terms of understanding new approaches and how they'll help us internally and with those that we serve. And again, that involves, careful research, careful experimentation, and collaboration. And finally, sort of threaded throughout all of these items in our portfolio of activities here in digital strategy, we're deeply engaged in building and engaging and understanding our communities. So that is a pretty big word, community is a big word, and we think it's really important. And so we're always sort of thinking about how our work affects our communities and how we can build it, how we can do this work in order to address their needs. So that's sort of the main areas of activity that we have in digital strategy to be a part of the library's broader strategic plan and move the agency forward digitally. But what does this mean in practice? So we're doing various things right now. Both assimilating technologies and strategy we've been exploring into the agency's work, while also looking at the horizon to forecast what's going to come next, not even just in 5 years, but in 7 years and 9 years, et cetera, whether it's artificial intelligence or DNA data storage, all of this with communities in mind. But, we're moving forward on things like assimilating AI into the library and developing further on this baked-in digital strategy in terms of looking at what the real framework is for that and how we measure digital progress. We do a fair amount of strategic visioning and forecasting in order to anticipate what will come next and what our future work will be like. And we can talk a little bit more about that if desired. We are working to build and learn from partnerships and community, both within digital strategy, the directorate here at the Library of Congress, but also, all of the things that our colleagues throughout different parts of the library have learned. And then finally, we're looking at large-scale data storage, so DNA data storage, other methods for storing large amounts of data, in order to be prepared for what the future holds. Whether we do adopt or don't adopt these sorts of technologies, our approach needs to be informed both by the general practice in the field and also the suitability for our purposes. So now I'll turn things back to Natalie to share a little bit more about what we are doing in this area.
Thanks, Leah. And just to highlight that last item there, the DNA data storage study. So we have a conference here that we hold every year, and it's called Designing Storage Architectures. And if you're interested in data storage, you can find that on loc.gov. There's a listing of all the conferences and the PowerPoints from all the conferences. And it's really interesting. It's a deep dive. That conference is a deep dive into the different media. And one of the up and coming that we've been exploring for the last couple of years has been DNA data storage. And now we're focused specifically on understanding its capabilities. And one of the things we're very interested in is the standards for that, and talking about longevity. DNA data storage, that's really the best use case is for longevity there. But and hopefully you've enjoyed hearing about our strategic plan and the way that we structure it and the items in it, because a lot of times when we think about what to collect or what to work on as a library as a whole, we often try to connect back to those strategic objectives, strategic goals, and that drives some of our decisions. So if you are looking to work with a national library or a library and understand if your data set or your project is a good fit for that institution, if you can look at their strategic plan and understand if you fit with what their vision is, it's really helpful. And so being able to speak to those objectives and goals in your proposals or in your interactions, I think is really helpful. All right, I'll go on to the next slide. So as Leah mentioned, Some of the other things we do, which you can find on our blog, The Signal at the Library of Congress, is we conduct experiments, and we've been focused almost, I would just say intently on artificial intelligence. We just released a blog post on our work for generative data for bibliographic records and some of our outcomes and quality standards for that work. And so we've been trying different machine learning models to understand what are some of the quality benchmarks, what are some of the processes, how can we support catalogers in the generation of bibliographic records. That's one of our major projects, and you can find that online, some of the outcomes of that work. We're also using generative data and text summarization in order for some of our legislation. So as I mentioned, we also manage the legislative data that comes out of our Congress. And so we're using artificial intelligence in order to help generate metadata for the bill text, a lot of our legislative data, and do some quality kind of testing and understanding of, can we summarize legislation? Again, it's historically kind of tricky because a lot of our legislation is written using the language of law, which to an everyday citizen is a bit cumbersome to understand. So that's something we're trying to work with artificial intelligence to understand if we can support analysts in that work. And then we are doing some experiments around creating data sets for training models and preparing them so that they're well-formed, standardized, the metadata is as complete as we can make them, and use these in training data and then offer them to others to use them to train machine learning models as well. All right, next slide. We also host innovators and scholars in residence. These are three that recently have been with us. Jeffrey U. Warren, who explored using one of our collections, basically the Sanborn maps, which in order to recreate cities that no longer exist in the time periods that this data was captured. And so that is one innovator, and the projects were well received, and he developed a toolkit so that local communities could rebuild their historic cities to reflect a time before the contemporary time, so that local communities can understand how their communities have changed over time. Another scholar in residence was Maya Cade, and this one was really, really interesting. Her focus was on emotive metadata. How do we add the issues of tenderness, or start to describe our materials with emotive qualities, not just the ones based in like dates and subject headings and et cetera? How do we add emotion to that so people can find and support search and discovery around audio and video when it comes to emotions like tenderness, for example? And then Brian Fu was an innovator in residence who now is part of our team, and he created an application called Citizen DJ, which allows people to mix and reuse audio from our public domain collections. And so he's used artificial intelligence to break down audio files into basic components, and then people can use this application to, for example, pick a drum beat from one audio file of our public domain collections and mixed it with, for example, the vocal of another public domain audio file, which is really, really neat. And that one's very popular and used a lot across the country. All right, next slide, please. And then I wanted to highlight another group, and this is connected to the communities work that we do, is our Connecting Communities Digital Initiative. So we do give grants to groups to work on projects in their communities to either boost the work that they've started or to start a new project. And one here at the forefront, so we have this slide includes some of our sample or example, grantees and the work that they've done. The one up front is an example of the Mary Church Terrell papers. And we had a group here that went through all of her works and then created this application that is really meant to inspire other artists. And so using her texts in order to create some inspiration so that you can use those in your own work. So that's another example. All right, and then was that the last slide? Yes, last slide. So there was a lot, an overview of, again, a large institution managing a lot of data, trying to make our collections, real, and people define themselves in our collections, but also hopefully you got a little bit of an idea of how we decide to collect or engage with those that are creating data sets. We'll go from there. And thank you for having us, and we look forward to any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Natalie and Leah, and of course Almut. This it's a very interesting juxtaposition of an almost individual project about a very tangible cultural heritage and a large-scale institutional project, which don't, of course, which complement each other in many ways, which become clear. May I ask the first question? Is that legitimate as the chair? Since our focus here is really on the amalgamation of technology, long-term accessibility, and also access. I have one question for Natalie and Leah, and another one for Almut. I start with the Library of Congress. The one for the Library of Congress is, in your strategic plan, you would have to have some kind of selection process. Is that right? Could you talk a little bit more about the criteria of this selection process? That's my question to you.
Right.
And
so we have, I'll start and Leah can jump in since she has hands-on experience with this in the materials department. But so we kind of have a hierarchy of strategies, and you'll find this in a lot of large institutions. So the strategic plan we walk through is a library-wide strategic plan. So this took a lot of consensus building. So all of our service units, and that includes, again, the National Library, parts of our of the Library of Congress, Congressional Research, U.S. Copyright Office, which has a bit of different missions. The strategic plan is the wider strategy that all of our groups use, and then there are strategies that fall underneath that, and so we do have other strategies. We have a, for example, an artificial intelligence strategy. We have a digital preservation strategy. We have a digitization strategy. So those strategies are in support of the larger strategic plan, and then those would guide the work specifically in those domains. So we do have a digital digitization strategy, and I believe we have a digital collections. If it's not a strategy, it is the guidelines for what we collect. And we do have collections officers that are charged with making those decisions. And I'll hand off to Leah, who can give a different view of that.
No, the same view. That's what I would say too. It is the digital collection strategy is also a strategy in addition to all of those other ones. But I think that part of what is so interesting about having this sort of overarching strategic plan for the library and all these different strategies underneath it is that the balance of creating collecting strategies, selection strategies, digitization strategies is, of course, in balancing kind of the specific with the general. So the criteria for selecting things to either collect or to digitize and sort of share with the public have to be considered carefully by the, in terms of the actual type of materials. And we have to get the level right. So we have an agency-wide digital collecting strategy, but we also have criteria for selecting things like Natalie mentioned, cereals, newspapers, just based on the particular nature of those collections, in addition to sort of an overarching sense of how you do this in the large library business. And the other part of this that kind of comes in, I think, is when do you refresh those strategies, right? So like what would trigger us to revise the digital collection strategy, to revise the criteria for selecting, things like historic newspapers or specific things, that involves a great deal of subject matter knowledge, a great deal of understanding of our audiences, but also sort of a real collaboration among different specialties. And I think one of the things that we are discovering as we move forward with this work is that it is increasingly difficult to imagine one person having all of the expertise necessary for these tasks. And so we really build coalitions in the library, both within the library and outside, to understand this work among many different specialties.
Great, thank you. Yeah, collaboration is really the key word for all digital humanities activities. My question to Almut is also about access, really, access to the material that you are creating, which is, I think, absolutely fascinating. I can't praise it enough. It's absolutely amazing, I think, especially considering the fact that it's a dying out tradition. How do you bring this to the public? How do you kind of address usability of the material, both within the communities, but also within communities that may not know about it?
Yeah, well, thank you. The film is currently available on the web, and you should all be able to watch it. What I just showed you under the address, which is www. at muya, muya.soas.ac.uk. I've just put it into the, can I just put it into the comment chat so that everybody can see? Just a moment. Or maybe, oh yes, Irving has just put it into the chat, exactly. And there, if you click on tools, there you will be taken to the interactive film. And then it says visit website, because SOAS couldn't host the application. So it then takes you to the Hasdai film. So that's freely available online, and everybody who's interested can watch it. And in fact, I've heard that Zoroastrian priests in Iran, where they have actually lost that ritual already, some 50 years ago under the Shah, they are now watching this, and they are trying to sort of to revive it in Iran, using that film.
Oh, wow, amazing.
Yes, so they are very interested in knowing more about it. So that's about the film. It's freely available. And the same also with the manuscript images, with the repositories which we are creating, that is available online. So one can log in, and you log in with your ORCID. So
okay.
yes, you log in. Everybody uses their ORCID as their username, and then of course your own personal ORCID credentials. And then also, if someone wants to annotate, the annotation is attributed to that ORCID identity. So and then everybody who contributes to the project gets the credit for the work which they do, because it's linked to their own ORCID.
Amazing. This is really also about data provenance comes into that, which is an important aspect of preservation.
Indeed. Yes.
Absolutely. I will have a look at the questions of the audience. There is, the first one is, someone says, thank you, Almut. That is, of course, clear regarding FAIR, as was discussed yesterday. My question was whether you could speak to a specific example of how the code was customized, designed, so that it did not fulfill these standards. For example, what was the issue when you started to migrate into the in-venue platform?
Yeah, well, this is a question which Peter Cornwell would be able to answer because he did that migration. And I'm not a computer specialist. I'm only a user. And but he told me that what he found that was the way the application was programmed. They wrote a little program in order to run that multimedia application. And that programming, the way it had been programmed, was specific to that particular company, or even to the individual who programmed it. And basically, there was a danger that only that individual would understand how it had been programmed. So fortunately, we could trace that person, and then the company had to reveal to Peter Cornwell the code, how exactly it had been programmed. And Peter had to reverse engineer it to undo what they had done, and then to format and to program it all according to these common standards. One of them is the web annotation data model. This is a common standard which applies throughout the globe, everywhere. And digital data, which you publish on the web, should use those standards. And that's what standards-based means, so that everybody can recognize it. So if any company tells you, oh, it's all going to be open source and free, but then often these companies, they take your data, or for example, your images, and then in order to publicize them on the web, they write a little wrapper, a wrapper, which makes it then available on the web. And that wrapper is often standards-based. And then if someone hacks into that wrapper, they can actually lock you out of your digital object, which you had given to the company to make available. And then you lose your digital object, your image. And this is what happened to the British Library. That's how someone took ransomware of their wrapper. And the British Library couldn't access the images anymore.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
This is a great revelation. And it also talks about the kind of work we do almost on a daily basis, taking data which is really inaccessible and the person behind it not available anymore, and trying to decode it in order to encode it again, almost.
Yes.
Great example. Thank you.
And Yasmin, we love what we're hearing here, because it is so true. And so that's, again, standards, there's a lot of groups internationally and nationally that are working in digital preservation and digital standards, that it's so important to support or engage with, to make sure that they're active. These issues are extremely important, and it so resonates, the label of open source. We've seen that here in the United States, where it is, you really have to take it, much like when you see branding new or improved on a product, right? You really have to try to dive in and see, what do they actually mean by open source? Because it might just be one part of it that is adhering to an open source best practice or standard, or they're contributing to the community, but they may be proprietary for other parts of it. So it is really not as common as people think that something is completely open source. It's often in this gray area. So when you are thinking about using these applications, you're thinking about contributing to a repository of some sort, you have to kind of be an educated consumer of some sorts in order to understand what is really open source here. And, we see a lot of we like to call it, here in the United States, we like to call it AI snake oil, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. Some people will say, oh, this AI is open source. It's on Hugging Face, so it's an open source model. That also, you have to kind of be an investigator and try to understand what is truly open source. And, it is a lot of work, but if you really care about this data, you have to invest yourself in it. And it would be lovely to give it over to an institution. And again, that's, our mission. When we collect something, we preserve it for the long run. But a lot of libraries, a lot of repositories, unless you can find one, like, Almut has done a lot of research and to understand what are ones to contribute to, you kind of have to take kind of charge of that and have, it within your long view as well. So I just want to reinforce that, because that's really important.
I think, Natalie, is not only an addition, it's really very, very important what you just said. And many of us fall into that trap, into the hands of companies, commercial companies. They say, oh, all our stuff is open source. They use that, but then they have this custom-made components, which one of their engineers has to program in order to make your data available on the web. So that is not standards-based, that is not truly open source.
Yes, great. That's an important warning to send out there. I carry on with the questions a bit, so to make sure everybody gets their questions answered. I have another one for Library of Congress. They say, when creating your strategy and implementing it, how do you balance ethical concerns with digital innovation? For example, you've mentioned a lot about using AI, which has plenty of drawbacks in terms of environmental impact and concerns over what work has been used to teach the machine. Do you find it difficult to embrace some of these technologies ethically?
That's a great question. Yeah, and I'll get us started and then turn things over to Natalie to add or correct me perhaps. I think that part of this is that yes, we do, and I think that with AI is a perfect example here, and we really take seriously the ethical dimensions and the responsibility that we have as the Library of Congress for implementing these technologies ethically. So one of the things that we are doing is at a strategic level, as Natalie mentioned, we are developing an AI strategy, and that involves all kinds of different things. But part of it is really looking at a very high level at what our principles, values, et cetera, are for using this new technology, which presents, I think, particularly challenging ethical dimensions. I don't know that anybody would argue with that. And so in this specific case of AI, we're looking at that high level, but at the same time, we're doing all kinds of other work to look at a sort of more specific, more practice-based level. One of the things that the library has been doing for about 5 years is exploring the ethical implementation of AI. First, by looking across the field around 2018, 2019, both in terms of really assessing the state of the field for cultural heritage and intellectual heritage organizations using AI, talking to practitioners across the country and around the world, and then implementing a series of experiments to look at not only the practical implications of using AI in our business, but also the ethical implications. And I think that we define ethics as broadly as we can, right? So trustworthy and authentic information, having quality standards for using these technologies, really matching up the use of these technologies in specific instances with what our mission is and what we're trying to do. It's not easy. It's a really difficult balancing act, and it's taken years and years to even get to the point where we can say that we have assessed some of these technologies and some are ready to go, we think, and some are not. But Natalie showed some of the experimentation that we've been doing, and I think that that part of the trick with AI is that it's at once sort of similar to what has come before in terms of technology, but it's really very different in a lot of ways. And so being able to look at what we've learned from previous technological implementations and figure out what's different about AI and figure out how we can assess those tools in light of all of the ethical issues with them is really key to our strategy here in terms of doing those experiments and looking at where they apply. And, I think that here with AI especially, but also with all of the sort of new and emerging technology implementation, I think that that we really are focusing on our work and our mission. So this massive collection of data, these massive bibliographic records, all of the different things that the library does and how we can implement these technologies specifically. I think that's really helped us to look at the different dimensions of them. But Natalie, is there more to add?
That was so well said. Just, since we are a federal agency, we are beholden to our Congress. They basically charge us with things to do, but we are a library, and our core value is really to build trust with those that we serve and those that we are preserving for. So we take it really deep to heart that what we produce using artificial intelligence has to be trustworthy and authentic. And if we can't sway from that, again, some of the materials that we have, you could question if an artifact or a material, also adheres to that. But as a library, we are adhering to authenticity and building trust. And so that is something that we constantly monitor. There's a couple of other things that are raised by this question, but that's like a whole new hour of conversation. But that question is really, really important, and hopefully one that you all are asking every day when you use these technologies, because it's changing so quickly, and our regulations in our countries and across internationally are changing because of the political climate. So it's something to ask every day.
All right, thank you. Erwin, did you want to say something to this? Well, no, I had a... Okay, well, then I carry on. There are two other questions for Almut from different people. I put them together a little bit because just to shorten them perhaps, but someone asks what was it? Was there a particular reason to choose Vimeo to display some of the video material?
Yes, there was, because the concept of Invenio is that it is, first of all, it's not only standards-based and it's in compliance with all those principles, but also the business model of Invenio is innovative because it's consortium-based. That means you have large companies which support this platform. To run a platform is extremely expensive, and no individual institution can actually really support it, or only at very great expense. And here there are various universities in Europe and also in Northern America, including Northwestern University, also Caltech, a company in the US, and others who use Invenio, who use that platform, and they pay for keeping it going. So we all use a single infrastructure, one infrastructure. And so you don't know, rather than each of them having their own infrastructure and their own paying their own engineer, there is one infrastructure which all these different users support. And this is the business model, which makes it also much more affordable than any other model.
Right, thank you. Yes. There is another question that asks, is it possible to ask Peter Cornwall to write a cheat sheet for us to ensure we can preempt those rough multimedia agencies from providing bespoke code?
What should he provide? A cheat sheet.
A cheat sheet.
Yes, I think he can. Yes, what should ring all alarm bells is custom made, but often they don't tell you. They don't reveal it. nor did the commercial company with whom I was working reveal it. And if something is custom made, you are at the mercy of the maker of that custom made application, because often only they understand it, and you have to pay them continually in order to keep your output alive. So you're almost taken hostage. Actually, that's how I felt.
So yeah, so be on alert and ask the
Yeah.
right questions right from the beginning.
Yes. So
Yeah.
we could ask Peter Cornwell to write a cheat sheet as what should ring the alarm bells.
Open source it.
Yeah.
And there is another question which almost I could answer: is the digitalization of your manuscript, did it raise any issues regarding copyright? And if so, how? Were any of the manuscripts unpublished?
Oh yeah.
All
Many of them where we didn't even know about them, and we photographed two whole collections in India. One of them was not even catalogued, and so of course the original object belongs to the owner of the manuscript, and we are greatly committed to honoring them, the owner of it, and we always make sure that they have a full set of the images which we take. And on the platform where the images are published, it is all listed under the institution or the individual who owns that manuscript. So it's directly attributed to them. So if it's a British library, it's listed under British Library. If it's another library in India, for example, it's listed under their name.
Right. Thank you. I want to have those in Fairest, actually. We have very similar strategies.
Yeah.
That's another question for thank you, Almut. For the Library of Congress. It says, you mentioned in your strategic plan that you are also looking into engaging emerging technologies. Could you elaborate on whether there are any specific XR or MR technologies, such as virtual reality or augmented reality, and how you're thinking about deploying them? Is it for broadening your audience, public engagement, or managing the collection?
That's a great question. And one good example of that you can find online, and I mentioned his name, Jeffrey U. Warren was an innovator in residence. We have a couple of great blog posts on his work. He used one of our collection of Sanborn maps, which is a quite comprehensive set of maps that have elevation. It was, I believe, based in used for fire departments and understand what the buildings were in order for them to protect those buildings. But so he used those to recreate. So he used VR tools and that collection as a base, and then recreated with communities so that it looked a lot like it was in the future, along with some of our other digital collections, our prints and photographs, etc. So it was a really great project that combined different collection items into one experience. And it was based in a local community so that it resonated with that community. It wasn't an abstraction. So we have not used any of those technologies internally. I think there's some potential, but again, the investment, there's no cost benefit analysis that would result in us going down that path, or some other kind of possibilities for other emerging technologies that are really help us to be more efficient. That one is a little bit on the edge, but we're tracking it. So it's mostly with engaging with our communities, and the communities understanding our collections and what's available to them to really understand and explore. So it's really has been with public engagement, and we will probably have some more work coming here soon that we'll announce next year, and that might result in some more VR, XR, MR technologies being used. But that's where we see a lot of resonance with both library staff and our patrons, is using it for them to understand our collections.
Great, thank you. And another question to you, Natalie. Someone saying, I'd be interested to hear more about the use of AI to summarize legislation. How did the Library of Congress approach the project, and have the results been successfully incorporated into the library catalog?
So we've used text summarization on two experiments. One is with our bibliographic data, as I mentioned. The main focus is generative data for metadata to help assist catalogers. We use text summarization of ebooks so that the cataloger has a more comprehensive summary than may have been in the book or from another source. So we've used text summarization there, and that is to support the catalogers. We're not publishing that currently. That is more of a supportive in the workflow, so catalogers can do their work more effectively. And then, as I mentioned, we've used text summarization for legislation, which is even trickier. As I mentioned, with our ebooks, a lot of times the language used is really for the reader. It's, those ebooks are meant to be read by a wide range of audiences. Our legislative data, our legislation is written in the language of law. And so we have a wide range of people that are using our legislative data. There's a lot of grassroots groups, for example, that use it to build advocacy around an issue, for example. And so the language of the law is not as accessible to a wider range of audiences. So what we found is when we use these tools to do text summarization, there's a lot of inaccuracies with how these models are interpreting. The natural language processing, for example, is interpreting the language of the law into plain language. And so it has been a more harder to use that closer to final form because of the analysis needed. So as these models and as we train smaller models, or we use devices or methods like the retrieval augmented generation in order to make these models work better with the language of law, those will get better, but we haven't really received seen an outcome that's meet our quality standards in order to directly publish it. So right now, for both of those cases, we're using it still in the workflow to support catalogers and to support analysts in doing their work. We're not directly publishing it.
Right, thank you. By the way, just a quick remark. Earlier on, there may have been a confusion between Invenio and Vimeo, just to be clear. They are two different things. And I read what was in the question, but it was wrong. So Invenio is the name. Thank you, Natalie. I can't see any more questions, only thank yous from everyone who asked the question and whose question you've answered, and other people. And from us, of course, this has been an amazing conversation, really eye-opening, and I hope this really gets out there, the messages get out there, because they are so important for everyone, and the amount of data that we are losing on a daily basis is incredible. So we really need to make sure we preserve this and have the right strategies to do this as well. So thank you very much for joining this public event. The next cultural heritage data school organized by CDH, Cambridge Digital Humanities, is from the 7th to the 11th of April, and applications are open for that. You will find them on the CDH website, for those of you who are interested in the next one. And I think with this, we can now close this event. Thank you very much again for your time and your very convincing talks. It's been great. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Fantastic. Thanks so much as well for you, Yasmin, to chair it. Thanks for all of our guest panelists. I'll finish the recording now and we'll end the session. Thank you very much, everyone.